Hey everyone, very excited for this next session. One of the most important, but maybe mysterious relationships out there behind closed doors with finance. We're going to be talking about how both internally and externally, revenue leadership and leaders in general can partner with the office of the CFO and finance, both from a planning perspective, just coming out of annual planning and kickoffs for a lot of folks with a big year ahead. How can we partner effectively with our finance stakeholders and making sure we have a successful year? So we have two amazing experienced CFOs here today. We have Danielle, CFO at League, where she spent the last 8 years helping navigate growth, scale operations, and transform how health organizations deliver a world-class digital experience to their members. And we also have Tyler here from Freshworks, who brings a wealth of knowledge in scaling SaaS companies. Before joining Freshworks, you might have heard of Zuora, where he took them from early startup days to a very successful IPO. So a lot to learn from these folks, and I'm personally excited to dig in. So thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today.
Thanks so much. So
Thanks for
good to
having
be
us.
here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, the first question we're going to jump in, we'll give you an easy one, and we'll make it more tough from there. Danielle, I'll pass this one off to you to start. How can CROs and revenue leaders better partner with CFOs from an internal perspective? I think a lot of people, maybe you get that promotion to VP, CRO, you haven't necessarily partnered with an executive on the finance team. And a lot of people are wondering, how can I be a good partner while making sure, goals are realistic and all that kind of stuff. So curious to get your take
Well,
on what advice you'd give to folks to partner with someone like yourself.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would flip the question a little bit too to think about how growth is the most important thing at the business. If the finance team is not spending a ton of time with your revenue organization, then they should be. I mean, I'll share a bunch of ideas on how revenue leaders can work better with me, but I spend like an inordinate amount of time with our sales team, and I have since the beginning of my time at League, like at the expense of our finance team to make sure that I know and I have a pulse on what's going on in the business because, growth is like the heartbeat of our business. But to get into like a few different ideas, um, like forecasts are the most critical part of how we run the business, and sales forecasts are at the top of that. You can't do your revenue forecast or your EBITDA forecast without understanding what's going on in sales. So, I mean, I need a CRO that's going to be honest with me and open with me about how deals are tracking and what the forecast is each quarter and how things are changing. Um, I need Salesforce to be updated. Like, I know it's so simple, but like, please just update the deals in Salesforce. I'm just kind of nothing without the data that you all are giving me. So, I mean, that's definitely key. I would
Mm.
say that again, how I kind of flipped the question at the beginning though, is it is the finance's job to get these things right though. Um, to get these disciplines and these processes right, I think is finance's job. Like I have implemented many different processes along the way to enable the CRO to give me the right information. I don't rely on the CRO to just come up with this stuff on their own. I have implemented all of these checks and balances along the way, and I just expect honesty and open communication from a CRO.
Awesome. So kind of that bi-directional. It's not just CRO or VP of sales delivering this stuff, is how are we partnering and have
Yeah.
context on some of the details and even the nitty gritty. Awesome.
Mhm.
Tyler, anything you'd add or kind of change to Danielle's perspective there?
Yeah, no, I think Danielle described it really well. Obviously, predictability is paramount, right? If we don't have predictability in a business, then it's really difficult to run the business. You don't know where you're going to make investment decisions. You can't, really have grasp on your business model until you have some predictability. So it's working together to make sure that we have not just the data, but visibility into the business itself and kind of what's around the corner, especially if you have kind of different types of sales motions, it can get quite complex. So that's the predictability is one part of it. I think in general, to just step back, it's the most important thing in my mind is the kind of common understanding that we all have the same goal. And when you approach it that way, then it's not like, okay, who's the, the bad people on the finance side and they're our enemy,
Mm.
as opposed to we're all in this together. So let's try to design an outcome that gets, number one, the company, what the company needs. Number two, what any kind of go-to-market organization needs as well, which is to be able to demonstrate success. And there can be a really healthy balance between those two things. But the conversations have to happen and there has to be a common understanding of, okay, what are the pain points on one side versus what are the goals on the other. And so that constant communication at the highest levels, but then also looking down at the micro to understand, okay, is it systems, people, process, and where do we need to make investments to make it easier for go-to-market folks to do their jobs? Because it is a really hard job. And so I think that's where the partnership has to kind of start with is this common understanding. And then you can work through hard issues as long as everybody realizes they're on the same team.
And where do we think that trope comes from? Because obviously we're describing the ideal state and this partnership and aligned to the same goals, but there is no doubt that sometimes it does feel like finance needs to be, the bad person and, kind of the, hey, we need to follow these rules or, oh no, I have to go into this forecast meeting as a revenue leader or, oh, we're going to get these numbers. Where do you think that breakdown so often comes from? And any advice
Mm.
for leaders on how to avoid that? Yeah, Danielle, maybe I'll pass it to you.
I think a big part I've seen is some fear around the consequences of missing a forecast and then the revenue leader not sharing what's actually going on in the business. Yeah, it's just it's fear based is what my experience has been. But Tyler, like I love what you said about us being on the same team. We really at League tried to tell all of the leaders, like, you're on the leadership team. You're not on the finance team. You're not on the growth team. You have your own teams, but you're also on the leadership team, and we're all in this together. And I found that that's really helped. Um, but yeah, to go back to your question, I building those relationships and knowing that, like, you don't have to be scared of telling me what's going to happen. Like, we're in this together, and we'll figure it out. That's been really, really important to get the information that I need from the CRO.
Yeah, I think just again being in that role before of owning that number, sometimes it can seem isolating because yeah,
Mhm.
other people are running the business, finance is doing a great job, operations, marketing, and it's like, well, at the end of the day, I carry the back, and like, this comes down to, you know, me to deliver that despite being on this, first team leadership
Mhm.
team. Yeah, Tyler, how do you see that differentiation?
I think that's
Because
a
it does feel like
that's
that,
a good
when you own the number, you want to deliver
yeah.
for your team. So I think that's where a lot of the fear and anxiety does come from.
So I think that's a great point, Ross, because I think if a company approaches it that, okay, a CRO or head of sales or something, it's their number and they feel like they're out at the top of the mountain by themselves,
Yeah.
with the spotlight where they can get all the glory, but also take all the pain.
Yeah.
That's a pretty unhealthy situation where Danielle just said it. It's like, we're all on the management team. So it's actually all of our, and, even the way we get compensated at Freshworks, it's not, we're all together. If we
Mhm.
miss, the bookings number, we all miss bonus.
Mhm.
And so when you start at the very top, that we're all on the same team is all of our number and there's no finger pointing. So we're all in it together. Now, you asked Ross, like, why does things break down? Like at the bottom layer, as a rep, you kind of want reps who are going to be at least, they want to close deals and you got to get it. And they're going to push the envelope any way they can if they're aggressive enough to get those deals closed. And
Yep.
that's okay. So you just have to have the governance structure in place that there can be boundaries that are put,
Mhm.
because you can't blame somebody for pushing up against the boundary, but you then have to have the capability to have common understanding at the top so that when push comes to shove at the end, you make the right decision as a company. It's okay to say no or create those boundaries.
Yep.
If you don't create the boundaries, then things can go awry. And then that's where, number one, you don't necessarily have predictability, but that's where you actually get really bad behaviors. And then you might have some risk to your financial statements, and that not, you can never get there. So That's why starting at the top with the foundational understanding that, hey, we're all in this together. And then kind of in all this together, that means these are the boundaries that we're going to create around things. This is what we need as a company. Then you have to have the mechanism by a deal by deal basis, how to kind of control that. And so that's where I think things break when you don't have it at the top, and then people get desperate because they might be, at risk of not hitting a number. So you're going to try to do unnatural things. And that's where at the end, if you don't have that common understanding, that's where real conflict happens.
There's something so powerful about the ambition, the manifesting your own destiny. Like I agree with you, Tyler. I don't want to lose that. I don't want AEs to lose that. I don't want our growth leaders to lose that. Um, so yeah, those checks and balances, I completely agree, are so critical. But I never want to put people down. I want people to feel like I can do it, even though the data says you probably can't close it this quarter. I want you to think you can, and I want you to go for it. So
Yeah.
it is such a balance of like, go manifest that, go make that happen. But also we need to predict what will happen at the bottom line.
And it's also our job to also have some empathy and every once in a while be a little bit creative, as long as we're not, kind of breaking the rules.
Yeah.
Because if you're just completely rigid, black and white, then yeah, that makes it really tough.
Yeah. My experience has been, kind of up and down in the different layers of the sales org and finance org is the people at the top kind of share the same philosophy, people at the bottom. And sometimes it's this middle management layer that actually stifles a lot of that creativity because their job obviously is to, enforce those processes. And then that's, I think, where some of the friction does come from. There might be a lot of alignment at the very top between the CFO and the CRO. Rep comes up with something creative and we're trying to do these things. And it's like, when you get to the CFO, I used to, elevate some of these asks and they'd be like, oh, that makes sense. Or how can we figure it out? Whereas, you might waste a month or two and lose a deal because in the kind of the middle ground, there's not a ton of that flexibility or empathy. So that's been some of my experience on the front lines. Awesome. Well, shifting gears again, we're going to kind of bounce from this internal perspective to external. Maybe to start, because again, there's kind of this trope around, finance people killing deals or, like love to understand the perspective of finance getting these asks without a lot of context and things that might not make sense or kind of mirror what they've been telling their team, in terms of budgeting and cycles and decision making. Like, why does it sometimes feel like, finance doesn't understand from maybe a sales rep's perspective and they're killing deals? What's the right way to work with them? Maybe we'll start with kind of some of the frustrating things and we'll get to some of the best practices. But, what's been some of the challenges having the decision-making power and budget holder power on the finance side when working on kind of external deals or with partners? Tyler, I'll start with you.
Well, I think if you on a deal by deal basis, we can chat about that in terms of, maybe finance doesn't understand. I think what ends up if you don't actually have I said boundaries, and if you don't have the capability to be involved and whether you consider it finance or something else, right? We, we have an order management deals desk group. It does roll up through me, but in the past it's rolled up through go-to-market teams. And in there being part of the deal, that also gets ahead of structuring a deal, right? You get in trouble when, a rep might be talking to a prospect and, stuff is communicated on a deck or something like that, that you get down to, okay, we can't price and package that way. Or, this doesn't, make sense from an economic perspective or something, right? And so getting ahead of it through enablement and training and everything else, but also having the systems to be able to kind of be part of that process. So you never actually get into a situation that something happened outside of process. It always does, but you got to be able to have those guardrails, which are then the things that you can create those boundaries in. And, without it, you're going to be at risk and you're going to have to do a bunch of cleanup. And then usually, and I've been in situations where so you have to pull back completely and kind of overdo it in the governance until you get back to a point where you feel like you have some machinery.
Yeah.
And so I kind of put it on both sides, right? I had an example once where is actually when I first got to Freshworks, and there was a deal. Really, they weren't paying their bill. This is a long time ago. It's like 5 years ago. I said, okay, let's just look at the contract in the order form, see what it says. And there was crickets, right? I'm like, we do have a contract in order form, right? And ended up we didn't for that deal, right? But I went to our head of sales at the time, and I was like, how could you possibly have put this through? And he's like, well, you can see me, right? And
Let me, yeah, that's not the right approach.
so there is accountability to, whatever you want to call it, the operation side or the back office side, to be able to have that infrastructure in place so the boundaries are understood and the rules are understood. Then you actually then can have a conversations if there's gray areas between. But if there's if that infrastructure isn't in there, then how is a rep supposed to know, or, who's going to be governing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there you have to start with that foundation.
Totally. And maybe Danielle, for you, the flip side of this is maybe being a partner to your internal stakeholders on them purchasing software partnerships or services. I'm
Mhm.
curious, how do you think about, either yourself or your team? Obviously there's budget planning and annual stuff, but things come up. It's business, right? Especially in, high growth companies, and when we want to, find an opportunity to either cut costs or drive revenue. What are the things that are sometimes challenging that come up, as that stakeholder who sometimes, you can be the person that shuts it down or approves it. What are some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I like to give my leaders a lot of autonomy over their budget, what they think is really important. And exactly like Tyler said, in the budgeting process, there's boundaries, there's envelopes. Um, but I really want to give my leaders the opportunity to switch out tech or change how they're spending their money. And I'm here as a thought partner, and I will help you buy technology that you need. I will help you think about headcount planning. Um, Obviously have strong opinions about these things, but I'm not the type of CFO that gets sent like business cases for every single thing that
Mm,
we buy and I sign off on ROI or a business case. Um, However, what I will say is that the one question I've been asking lately is tell me about this company's AI roadmap, because they can put a beautiful business case in front of me, but this company won't be around if they don't have an
wow,
investment in
interesting.
AI. So
Yeah.
just tell me about their roadmap. What are they doing? Um, just show it to me. So I think as a sales leader, like you need to know that we're asking those questions. And you need to have a story and you need to have a roadmap and you need to be implementing things
Yeah.
that will help you grow in this respect, or you probably will cease to exist in a few years. So that's
Yeah.
like one of my key questions I've been asking lately.
And between you both, I'm curious just to like, what are the kind of two or three most common things that you would want to see from a note? Say, you get a note from your CMO. Hey, here's this thing that came up. I know we're trying to, let's say go up market this year. Here's the thing that my team, we've been testing or heard about from a peer. We really have high conviction that we should add this, mid-year. What are some of the, kind of immediate things that would make it an easy yes or no, if it was included in, kind of a few bullet points to your office?
On that on the, and we're talking about purchasing or tools and things like this on a
Services or tools
case
or
by case. We're
partners.
trying to do, yeah, we try to write a business case for everything we're buying. And unfortunately, on the go-to-market side, there can be a proliferation of tools, right? And because everybody has the fancy new thing. And then there's a lot of overlap and things like that. And so the business case has to justify the need, but also the outcome. And that outcome, I don't want to be too draconian and say, hey, you just can't do it, right? But if somebody wants to spend some money on stuff, it's like, okay, then you got to use it. And you got to kind of hold your folks accountable
Yeah.
as opposed to throw it in. What I don't like is niche products that are only going to be used by a piece of an organization. And me, like, okay, if you have your AEs and your hunters or something like that, product that one region likes maybe Europe, they want it for there, but there's going to be something different in North America, because I
Yeah.
think that creates disparity across the kind of whole thing on how you run the business.
And
And
admin work,
so
right?
that's the kind
Like
of, yeah,
things take time to enable and whatever. So if you have like
yeah,
17 of those, maybe it's best in class, but now you're spending whatever time and money and attention. That's definitely a
yeah,
cost that people don't,
totally.
don't
And that's
tie to
different than
the,
doing, yeah, it's different than doing a pilot, right? Because a pilot is, hey, let's test it with the goal of rolling it out holistically. But having a disparity across solutions or the way that we're running go-to-market motions, and goal with that, those are the things that I would shut down pretty quick. In general, though, across spend, it's not really, you hire professionals to be able to run their organizations, and our job is to partner and also kind of be the guardians of the business model at the highest level. And so when we think about go-to-market spend, we start at the highest level. We have a concept called GEI, or Growth Efficiency Index. And we kind of get agreement on what efficiency looks like. But then as you peel back the layers, there's got to be autonomy for folks to make decisions. And then even, some of those decisions, they'll be bad decisions, some will be good decisions. So placing bets is actually kind of important. But the trick is, okay, how are you going to measure against these things so you know if stuff is working or not? And that's also FP&A's job to help out with that. But that is rigor and, actually requiring, if you're making a bet, that people go on in and using it, and then actually having the discipline to measure it and say, okay, that worked or that didn't, as opposed to, let's buy a bunch of stuff or do a bunch of events and then never do a look back on what didn't.
totally. Yeah. Showing that you thought through those things, I think, are important. And, yeah, again, you're talking about being a good partner too. Just showing you've done that work and thought. I think a lot of people skip that and they're just like, but this thing is so important. It's like, okay, why help me translate that to your world? Because, you live in marketing, or you live in sales, or you live in CS. Okay, that may just organically make sense to you, but helping other people understand that, who do have the responsibility to the business for, where money goes.
I think if it's done right, like Danielle started it, growth is paramount, right? And so, but there's also a fixed pie that can be spent across the entire company. And then at a management team level, if you can actually go in to the leaders and say, go to R&D and say, hey, if we actually hold off on some spend and give those dollars to go to market, if they can return back enough ARR, then I will actually give you more R&D spend 6 months from now. So that trade-off, kind of having one section go on a diet and feed the other, that can be really healthy. The healthy parts comes through accountability then, because then you got your R&D leaders saying, hey, I'm willing to do that and starve our group a little bit, but you need to make sure you get a return for this. And so then it becomes not, one person's problem, everybody's problem, but there is a true accountability, and, kind of not a tension, but a good, kind of, I guess it is tension, across the groups that way. And I like that. I think those things can be actually healthy for an organization.
Maybe one thread to pull on, Tyler, that you said is around that, constant evaluation, making sure products are actually being used and we're getting an ROI from them. I think that is something that we need to do constantly, and look at our tech stack, look at what's important for us for next year. And so maybe for the revenue and growth leaders, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of CS people who are like listening in on this too. Like I cannot tell you how many times we have, implemented a solution that we signed a very short-term contract on. We were experimenting and we got rid of it the next year because we just had very poor CS involvement on the other side and didn't really enable our team well. Like maybe the tool was amazing and it just didn't
Yeah.
enable us, and we displaced it with something better or different. So
Yeah.
I would say that like the follow on CS is just so critical. And I don't always see that happening well across.
How would you want either yourself or your team engaging with a vendor, whether it's technology, whether it's service, post signature? Because again, I think we have a really good, notes into the CFO, hey, this thing, but like you're saying after, I don't
Yeah.
think there's a really strong playbook around that. like, what's the cadence? Do you want to be involved in EBR? Is it just updates? Like, what kind of things would you want either yourself or your
Mhm.
stakeholders in your organization hearing from, um, to make sure you have visibility? Because sometimes it does
Yeah.
happen, you just don't hear about it, and then they're kind of like having to tell the story,
Mhm.
10 days into, renewal or something. So yeah, Danielle,
Totally.
what would
Yeah,
you
I mean,
say?
help me help you. Like, I have a lot to do. I can't analyze the usage or the productivity of every single tool that we have. Like, I can't do that. Um, so help me do that. Like, be my champion, be your tools champion, send us quarterly what our engagement looks like, how we can be using it better. Yeah, I actually just don't see that done very well, honestly. So I would love more support to do that, and you'll have more success with keeping our technology in place. It's just will be more ingrained in our culture and our business if you do that.
Totally. And Tyler, what about yourself?
I agree. Uh, and look, where Freshworks is not great at this either, but it is surprising to me how many companies that they go in and they build a solution to promote, what would potentially be, a best practice in processes or the way you're running some function. Yet the promotion of what best practice is isn't actually there after you buy. It's just go use a solution,
They're not
right?
living what they're
As
pitching.
opposed,
Yeah.
yeah, or even helping after, right? Like the pitch at the beginning is, hey, this is best practice and you ever do, but you buy the solution is like, there's nothing in there on nudges of, hey, you should be doing this, right? And that's not best practice or a constant kind of learning.
Mhm.
And so then the customer is kind of up to their own devices to try to figure it out, even though they might have the solution that can help them. And when software providers specifically go do that, then you're not just providing the solution, you're actually becoming part of the actual operations of the business, and then you become pretty mission critical. When you're not, then it looks like just another software. There was a while here we had such a proliferation of tools that if we kind of put in a rule that you wanted to buy something, you had to get rid of two. And you know, sometimes you turn these things off and you realize nobody's using it. Like
Mhm.
that, like you don't even miss a beat, and that's
Yeah.
pretty, kind of scary. I'm like,
Yeah, that's a good point, and kind of it's people are buying technology for an outcome and an impact on their business, not for the technology itself. And I think we can get lost in that a lot.
mhm.
And I think you can actually, especially if you're a startup trying to compete with some pretty big names out there, you can actually provide more impact by partnering more closely with the organization and actually having that strong usage or measurable outcomes on things as, having 50% of the features because you're delivering on the promise. People are using it and you're sharing those best practices as a true partner versus just big company name, got the contracts across the line, but then there wasn't a lot of enablement or support because they didn't think they needed to do that to get the renewal. So I think there's a huge opportunity, especially Danielle mentioning these new AI companies and a lot of challengers to larger tech and tools out there. I think there's an amazing opportunity to displace a lot of folks that I think have gotten lazy in terms of servicing their customers. Um, cool. Shifting gears, we've talked a bit about how revenue leaders can partner more effectively with the office of the CFO. We've talked a bit about both deals internally, but also doing business with external third parties. Maybe zooming out a little bit, I'd love to get your takes on just the last few years. There's just been crazy whiplash, especially in the tech world. This massive boom for almost a decade. And then on top of that, kind of COVID boom for a lot of companies, and then this huge pullback and consolidation, and now kind of this like, one thread for AI, another thread for just some challenging macro conditions. I'm curious to hear where you both think things are going in both 2025 and kind of the near term, and some of the key kind of macro trends that you're tracking and how that impacts the way that you're planning for your business. So, Danielle, I'll pass the mic over to you and kind of just as you're doing your job,
Mhm.
planning all these things, like what's in the back of your mind? You mentioned AI. Like, are there kind of two
Yeah.
or three things that um, you're kind of trying to keep up to date with to make sure you're seeing around those corners?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think CFOs have been in like the hurt locker a little bit the last few years. It's been tough, like not knowing where our next meal is coming from, capital not being deployed. So we've had to make a lot of really tough decisions for the business, and it was the right decisions to make because, like I said, without capital being deployed, we had to make sure we were getting closer to profitability. And I know every CFO had to go through that, and every leadership team had to go through that. So that was tough. I am an eternal optimist. That was The last few years were very incongruent to how I operate. I like to take risk. Um, I like to spend money on innovation. So yeah, that was really hard for me. But I definitely learned a lot in the process. But thinking ahead into 2025. Again, caveat this with I'm an optimist. I really think we're going to see a lot more deals get done in 2025. I'm already seeing it. There's a lot of dry powder. Um, we're going to have to start seeing the deployment of capital, depending on where these funds are in their life cycle. Some of these funds that have deployed a lot of capital already in the 2020 era. They're going to be looking for very, very high quality assets because some of the assets that they invested in the 2020, 2021 era are not doing very
The
well.
bar is basically higher because of that.
Totally. Then there are some newer funds that won't have as much of that like strict criteria. As people are thinking about going out and raising money, I think that's really important. Where are these folks are in their fund life.
Mhm.
But regardless, I really think that we're going to see a lot more deployment of capital, even despite all the turmoil in the U.S. right now. I still think we're going to see a lot, and I've already seen a lot of deals getting done. I'm following healthcare much more closely than other industries, but I've seen some really interesting deals get done even in the last month. More
Mhm.
M&A is happening. PE is coming in, smashing some things together. I'm very excited about 2025. Like so pumped to get back to growth. Uh, so that's what's on my
I like
mind.
that prediction. Let's hope that one
But yeah,
hope that one
I'm just
sticks.
I'm just
And Tyler, how about yourself and more on the public market side?
Yeah, I think we have earnings next week for last year, and then we'll give those are fiscal, so we'll give guidance and all of that. We have an interesting business, right? We have two different product lines, EX products and CX products. EX being kind of for anchored by Fresh Service, which is our solution for IT, and then CX kind of anchored by Fresh Desk, which is support. The reason is not two products isn't really interesting. The interesting part is, we're selling from the SMB all the way up to now, large enterprise. And, with on a global basis. And so in the past, we've been kind of a recipient through broader macroeconomic, pressures if they happen to SMB or where they, as interest rates increase, you see a decrease in spending. I agree with Danielle. I think, we're coming out of a lot of that. And I think that in general, it's not like companies are going back to hiring, which, we have historically been an agent model, even though we are moving more to a lot of AI
Mhm.
kind of consumption-based things, that you have to be in control of your own business model. So if your historical methods of growth or expansion aren't going to be there, you have to figure out a different way to grow with your customer base or to acquire new customers. And being in control of your own destiny in terms of spend and everything else, allowing you to go through these transitions are super important. And I think, for us, we've seen that pressure for the last couple of years. So we've kind of been working on it for a while. On the SMB side, you could just see there's a variety of, folks who've already reported and I think what's going to end up happening is that companies are, and even little organizations are going to be very fickle in the way they spend. I think there's a lot of spend that's happening, but you got to go earn it
Mhm.
as a company. You can't just, show up. And there's so many choices from a software perspective
Yeah.
that, you have to differentiate yourself, but you also have to deliver the promise that you're making. And, if you don't, you're going to languish, I think. And so it's a good challenge, right? But the market opportunities for most of us are huge. So you just got to go execute against it.
I completely agree. And that's kind of, the theme of everything we're trying to do with, the XKO execution. It's the opportunities are out there. And this isn't the turn, post COVID where, you know, mass layoffs, all this stuff. Like, yes, it's just harder out there. And there are opportunities and there are, chunks of the market that are doing super well and growing super fast. There are others that are pulling out and you have to be much more thoughtful about the opportunities you're focused on and which ones you aren't. Um, but yeah, like you said, people are looking to solve problems out there more than ever. I actually think that it's really good pressure if you have a great product and can deliver that. I think those types of partners can stand out even more because of the pressure. And before it was kind of like, oh, it doesn't matter. We buy this thing, we buy that thing. No, like you can be core key partners, part of the few that really make it when people are pulling out, like you said, Tyler. Like that's what we're seeing. Get rid of two or three things for one. That's the status quo today. But now you can be that one. That wasn't the opportunity before. No one would spend time with you because you're just growing and hiring. Now we're finding people want to spend more time with the folks that they're invested in. So I do think that's kind of the silver lining in this type of market. This was, yeah, super informative conversation. I got a lot of things to think about for my own business and how we partner both internally and externally with the office of the CFO. And yeah, hopefully, folks out there listening got a different perspective on both how to engage with their partners and also with their customers. So thank you so much for both taking the time out of your busy days and this time of year to share some learnings and insights with the community.
Thank you, Ross and Danielle. A great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Great conversation, both of you.